Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Check for YouTube 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mic check for Town Hall streams 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
It's interesting being inside with people on the other side of us.
All right, we're going to get started. It's 6 o'clock. Woohoo! Woohoo! There we go. All right, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Candidates Night. You know what? It feels really cool to be sitting on this side of the table. I'm usually up there sweating when I come in and talk about our budget for the library. So, speaking of the library, my name is Mary Lou Bukavalis. I do work at the Graves Library, and this is Yanina Nicholas, who's going to be keeping our time tonight. Would you like to demonstrate the...
Sure. So when the time will run out, you will hear these chimes. Can you hear it okay, everyone? Okay, perfect. That's more for candidates to hear. And you will get there.
And also with us is David Powell. He's sitting in the room over there being the wizard for tonight. So we are going to hear from our two selectman candidates, Mary Beth Gilbert and George Bentley. There you go. And our two school board candidates, Tim Spang and Susan Holleran. So a couple of rules to keep in mind for this evening. For the audience, we want to thank you all for being here tonight and online, and for submitting your questions prior to the evening. It was a great help to get those. And because of our time limit for the forum, we are not going to have questions from the audience tonight. So this is right here. And when we start asking the official questions, each candidate will have 3 to 4 minutes. So our lovely timekeeper is going to make sure you know when your time is up. So please be respectful of the clock. And please also speak right into the microphone, because if you sit back like this, sometimes it's really hard for people to hear you. So, okay. So when we start, we do want to ask you about your family, your education, your employment, and why you are running for your particular seat. So are you ready to begin?
Sure.
All right. Mary Beth, would you like to get us started?
All right, thank you. Hi, my name is Mary Beth Gilbert. I'm running for the select board seat here in the town. Thank you to Mary Lou for hosting this, and Lori and the town for giving us this opportunity to speak to you all, and thank you all for coming. So I currently sit on 3 boards in the town. I'm on the Zoning Board of Appeals, the Budget Board, which April came and gave, or Mary Lou came and gave a great presentation to, and the Assessment Review Board. So it's my time spending on these boards that I've noticed some headwinds facing our town, and they're specifically in our core services, and specifically in that is in our strategy and resources for our fire department in the future, and also for police. So this is a critical issue and a tough problem to solve. And I believe that in order to solve problems like these, you have to have a varied points of view. You have to have vast experiences, different options being brought to the table, and critical thinking. And when you have those together, then I think you can have the right kind of discussions and the right kind of decisions that will come forward from them. I believe with my background that I'm able to bring that with the current select board and to have these discussions and bring the right solution to the table. I am running because of that as one of the reasons, but also there are some other ones that we'll get to tonight. My background, I just retired. I'm 35 years at Xerox Corporation. I started as a mechanical engineer. Midway through, I got my MBA and I got moved into corporate strategy and then on to run a business for Xerox in an executive position. It was a global business. I'm known as a collaborator, as a business leader, as a strategic thinker, and as somebody that can take a strategy thought and bring it to implementation and fruition. I believe that, you know, in our town right now, that's a skill set that I think would be very nice value add to the town board or to the select board. In terms of my parents were of the greatest generation. They instilled me a very strong work ethic and also the need to give back to the community. I try to live my life with those principles, and also I don't have an accent that is familiar to here. I grew up in upstate New York, and it's the real upstate New York. It's called Utica, New York, and it's 20 minutes south of the Adirondack Park. So my background for growing up was the Adirondack Park. That's where I developed my love of nature, my love for the environment, and my respect for people that make their living off the land and the need to protect that ability to do so. My tie to Kennebunkport is through my husband and his family. He's been summering here at Goose Rocks Beach for 70 years. His family built their family home here, and then for the past 30 years, my husband and I have owned property and then had the great fortune to move here permanently when I retired. I have a very strong view on financial accountability and responsibility. I would say that I'm financially responsible. Somebody would call it fiscal conservatism. I do believe I view the town's people as shareholders in the town, the taxpayers, and I think it's up to the responsibility and incumbent upon the board and the town management to make sure that the people, the residents of the town, the taxpayers of the town understand the return on the investment for what the town is doing and the activities that they're doing. And this can be through revenue and profit, or it can be advancements on social and climate issues. I strongly believe in the ability to view people not through a pinhole or one of their opinions, but to truly sit back and to listen to people. In serving on the boards, I've experienced that where I've been able to sit back and listen to people. There's a great amount of learning that can be done when you do so, and also I've been given the ability to be listened to. And I think if I'm voted onto the select board, I'd like to continue on with that. And I think that would enable our community to get that much stronger. I thank you for your opportunity tonight. Thanks.
George, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you here tonight. My name is George Bentley, and I'm running against Mary Beth for Selectman of Kennebunkport. Thank you, Anna Lou, for hosting the meeting. A little background on myself. I come from a military family. My schooling was mainly done at military bases in Western Europe. When I was 15, my father retired from the Air Force and came to Maine and worked at Nassau College in Springvale, just north of here, as a business manager. My mother, in turn, was a social worker and a church organist. She spent a lot of time with Head Start, York Community Action, and Sweetser over in Saco, as well as playing the organ for 50 years in the community, mainly at Holy Cross Lutheran in Kennebunk, which was our church. But she also played on an interim basis in places like the Congregational Church, United Baptist, and down even a few times at St. Anne's. A background on myself, I graduated from Sanford High School, and in turn went to Babson College in Wellesley, Massachusetts, where I have a degree in finance. Followed up a few years later with an MBA in accounting from Lubin School of Business in New York City. As far as work goes, I started with the Air Force for a few years and quickly transitioned to the reserves. I spent 20 years, among other things, flying heavy jets throughout the world. Spent a year and a half on active duty with Desert Storm. And after those 20 years, went to the headquarters of the U.S. Transportation Command in St. Louis, where I worked in the Mobility Control Center. And additionally, spent another 5 years as what's called an Air Force Emergency Preparedness Liaison Officer, primarily in Florida and the Virgin Islands, where we planned for hurricanes. And unfortunately, I was in the Emergency Operations Center several times, working actual hurricane events where we coordinated between the local communities, FEMA, the governor's office, and of course the military, who was providing some of the assets. On the civilian side, I worked at People Express Airlines as a pilot. It looks like this group's old enough to remember People Express. Oftentimes I get a blank look when I say that. And was also working with the chief financial officer there. They were bought out by Continental, who had tough times, and they were good enough to give me a leave of absence. And a group of us started up a company called Miami Air International, flying Boeing airplanes throughout the world, charter for the military, also for sports teams and other groups. That was a tremendous opportunity to meet people and do things. At age 65, I had to retire from the airlines and went to work for corporate flying, a company called FlexJet. Great job that had me home-based right here. They would fly me to wherever the airplane was that I wanted to fly, or they wanted me to fly, and then would return me back here to Portland. I came to Kennebunkport in 1997, in large part because my mother's life was focused here, and she was having financial difficulties with a big house up in Sanford and some other problems in the neighborhood after my father died. So for 23, 24 years, my mother, Ruth Bentley, some of you may know her, lived here full-time, and this was like my base of operations, as I spent usually 2 to 3 weeks a month on the road. I'm divorced. I have 4 children, 3 of them in college, and 1 still in high school, which keeps me busy. Now, why am I here? Well, for transparency, about a year ago, I had a bowel cancer. And after 6 months of chemo, I was able to recover from that, but it basically ended my flying career. So now I have free time for the first time and decided to run for office and work for a community that has been so good to me and particularly to my mother. I want to return to them some of what they gave us. My 4 goals are the continuity of a well-run town, to keep the mill rate, very importantly, at a reasonable level, and to keep the character of the town much as it is today, as much as possible, and at the same time to support the Kennebunk Heritage Housing Trust for low-income housing needs. As you can tell from my background, I lack experience in town government, but I think that I'm a quick learner, and my previous experiences in finance, accounting, operations, and dealing with people makes me well-suited for the job. That's all I have. Thank you for...
Thank you, George. Next, we're going to hear from Tim.
Hi, thanks everybody for coming tonight. I was raised in Kennebunkport for 57 years. I'm one of 10. I'm number 8 in the family. I have over 15 nieces and nephews that mostly live around here. I went to Catholic school in Biddeford till 8th grade, and then I went to Biddeford High School. If I am elected, I think I will be the only person without a college education on the board. I went to the School of Hard Knocks. I started my business when I was 17. I'm an entrepreneur. I started Spang Builders 40 years ago. I started Hazelwood Handyman 27 years ago. I have 50 employees in town. I deal with 80 subcontractors day in, day out. It's a family business. Jameson Davis, she runs both companies. She's my daughter. She's on the board now. I think we would be the first father-daughter on a board in the state of Maine for sure. And both kids work in the business. Jamie runs the company, I said that. Both kids graduated from Consolidated, middle school and the high school. Luckily, I say this because I went to Biddeford High School, because I went to Catholic school there. I grew up over by Goose Rocks. And I actually thought I was dumb in high school. I am severely dyslexic. I have severe ADHD. I don't sit still. I move constantly. And luckily in Biddeford, they had programs called Industrial Arts and a vocational school, and I excelled at them. And I was really lucky. It pushed me into what I am today. For my work experience, dealing with employees, customers, subcontractors, vendors. I feel like a marriage counselor a lot of days, just dealing with so many people. And if I get elected, my family and business experience I think is invaluable. These are some of the things that I want to bring to RSU 21. Because I am disappointed that we did a $50 million renovation and we don't have woodworking class at the high school. We have no trades. There is a problem, program, a STEM program. It's science, technology, engineering, and math, and they actually have the woodworking shop. You know, I hope that this can be brought back to the district. And I have been in contact with the director at the Biddeford Vocational Center. They just got a $7 million grant, and they're doing a lot of remodeling, and that was a great school. I went there, and I graduated from in there in 1983. My son graduated he went to school there in the early 90s, and it's still there today. It's a great program. And Sanford has a brand-new school, a vocational school, and Biddeford takes 3 districts. Sanford takes 8 districts, and I'm not sure of the exact number, but I think I heard almost 150 kids got waitlisted this year at Sanford. And so it's real successful. It's a great program. Biddeford's is too. And Clayton and I, we've been on the board for years, in Biddeford on the advisory for the construction trades. You know, removing these opportunities is one of the changes that happen in our district. And there's a lot of really big changes in the district and state. We as parents are losing our rights, and students that are not protected in groups, I think they're not being listened to. Small minorities in the schools are changing things so fast that a majority of our shareholders, students, parents, taxpayers, guardians, are finding things out after they get voted on. And most people I speak to around town, they don't know what's going on in the district. And if they do, they won't say a word. Because I have said that word. As far as saying things. I was at I know how they feel. I was at the first policy meeting this year, and it was about the transgender policy. And I brought up things that I was concerned about as a father, a grandfather, and factual things about the school and in the district. And now I'm called a homophobe and a bigot. And I think it's interesting. In this district, people would rather call names than have a conversation about difficult issues. I'm going to do it tonight. You know, as a father, I am simply concerned that a 13-year-old daughter goes into a locker room or a bathroom with an 18-year-old man that's that is identifying as a female. No medical diagnosis, but this is the policy we have now. It's just voted in. And the administration is finishing the procedures on this. And, you know, and parents, what I said about parents is a student can identify as a transgender, even transition, and without parental permission or knowledge. That's what they're toying with right now in our district. And I'm not against transgender. I have a nephew that's transgender. But I'm going to say the things that no one else will. And people can take it for what it is. You know, I know about this because I was at a lot of the policy meetings this spring. And sadly to say, it was one-sided because people wouldn't get up and say anything. And so I think communicating with all stakeholders is one of the most important things in this district. And listening to things that people don't want to hear. And I think I'm that person. I hope to pull people to the middle of the path and have hard conversations and try to bring some common sense to this board. I hope to. And, you know, that's what I think. I hope to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And last but not least, Susan Holleran.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for putting this on. I think it's great, and I hope we continue doing this going forward. Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Holleran. I'm running for school board from Kennebunkport, and sitting in front of me here are my 2 greatest gifts, my daughters who go to consolidated school. We still pinch ourselves on a regular basis that we get to live in this amazing community, and I really hope that I get a chance to serve on the school board. A little bit about me. I grew up in southern New Hampshire. I went to Trinity High School in Manchester. I went to college in Northeastern Massachusetts and got the benefit of getting 2 graduate degrees on a part-time basis down in Washington, D.C. I got a master's in communications from American University and an MBA, like a couple of other people on the board sitting up here, from George Washington University. And I did that part-time. I was working full-time and did that on a part-time basis. And because my parents from a very young age instilled in me that education is important, that giving back to the community is important. I'm the youngest of 5 children. My father is deceased. My mother lives in New Hampshire. We have a family home in Wells, Maine that we've had for 30 years or more. It was my parents' lifelong dream to have a home in southern Maine. And they looked for, I was joking with someone today, it felt like they looked for about 20 years to find just the right house that they could afford. But probably in reality, it was shorter than that. But we've had the benefit of that house in Wells for many years and still enjoy it to this day. It was the reputation of RSU 21 that really sealed the deal for me. I'm a divorced single mom. In deciding where I wanted to raise the kids, I wanted to raise them in an environment that was similar to the one I grew up in southern New Hampshire. And so the benefit of not living in an apartment and being able to be outside in the open space after school, the kids run around outside with the dog in the yard, that's how I grew up. My mom would ring the bell when it was time to come in for dinner. And I don't need to ring a bell here. We don't have that much land, but really, I see the difference in the kids, in not only in the community but in the school that they go in. It's a wonderful school community that they belong to. By way of professional background, I lead communications for a global consulting firm. I get to work from home, which is really wonderful because I love our house. And before that, I worked for the World Bank Group doing development finance. For those who don't know, the World Bank is part of the United Nations system. And so I used to lead an environment and social thought leadership program there for about 12 years. So why am I running for school board? I'd love to see a show of hands. I know people on Zoom won't be able to do this, and certainly those who are watching on TV. But how many of us have had really formative moments? Tim, you talked about the times that you struggle with dyslexia, but you really found your path in the trades and have had a very successful career as a result. How many of us have really had formative moments in school that you remember to this day, even going back to elementary school? Yeah, a lot of us. In my view, education is as much about learning about our world as it is learning how to think and form points of view. So it's not so much about telling me what to think. It's teaching me how to think. And that formative moment for me came in elementary school when I had a teacher, Mrs. Howe. She actually had a place at Moody Beach. I don't know if she's still alive. But she taught in the Hooksett in the New Hampshire school systems. And for whatever reason, I ended up in this class of 5 kids. It was a creative thinking class. And in that class, Mrs. Howe every week would come in. She'd plop down something in the middle of the table and say, figure out what it is and what purpose it serves. I was the only girl in that class. There were 5 of us. And we needed to sit around and debate what it was and what function it served and come up with a consensus on what it did. And that, for me, was so formative and so impactful in my life because, again, it didn't teach me what to think. It taught me how to think. And in wanting to get the seat on the school board, I see my role as I don't have an agenda. I don't have a list of things that I want to do. I want to come and learn. I want to come and learn from different points of view. You and I have very different views on the transgender policy, by the way, Tim, because that was enacting a law and updating the policy as a result of the Maine Human Rights Act, which applies to all students, public and private students across the state. But I see it as my role on the school board to try to help students thrive in whatever way is most meaningful to them, including transgender students. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
So Mary Lou, can I just tell people that we do have some seats over here? If anybody wants to come over and sit down? Now's your chance. Come on. And I'm just gonna remind everybody, as the official timekeeper, that we do have 2-minute responses. So when you hear the chimes, it's time to wrap up.
Thank you, Lori. 2 minutes. Okay, so the first question, we are going to start with George.
Okay.
How do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in Kennebunkport?
Well, that's a pretty open question there. The best thing I can say is to be involved in the community as much as possible and to invite invite them to participate, and if not, encourage them. And if they don't, go out and meet them, and meet those who want to participate. Unfortunately, in this town, as I've discovered, getting signatures and going around, over half the people are not full-time residents here. So that presents a big problem because generally they're not interested. In addition, a lot of the people here in town spend a lot of time in Florida and other places, particularly in the wintertime. So the key is actually reaching out to the people who are here full-time, who are concerned. And that's my answer.
Okay. Next, we will ask Tim. How do you plan to involve residents in the decision-making process in Kennebunkport or the school district?
It would have to be through communications as far as whether it's having meetings so you can have roundtables and people talking about things. Either the cable channel, making sure that it's on the Rolodex that some people watch to see what's going around on town. The newsletter, whether it's for the school, it would be the newsletter of the school. It would be sending things home with the parents. It would be sending things out to mailing to the taxpayers. The newspaper, key people in town, getting people that talk to a lot of people, whether it's in one of the stores or businesses that people see so many people. It would be inundating the town to try and force people to see what's going on. Because I think that's what has to happen. Because I think a lot of people are not picking their heads up and they're ignoring some things. And they're afraid to say things. Hopefully, and they'll be in a forum to where people can talk and say things that people don't want to hear.
Mary Beth?
So I think there's a few things. So one, in going and getting signatures, I did run across a couple groups of people that sort of feel like they're no longer able to engage. And I do not understand the complete circumstances that might have happened in some of the other town meetings. But I think that's why I made my statement in the opening remarks, is that I think it's very important to make sure that we return to a state where there's openness at the meetings, where people can come in and feel very safe and be able to bring forward their point of view and have everyone sit back and listen to them. I'm a very firm believer that people have so many various life experiences, knowledge, that it ill behooves any of us to not sit back and listen to others. So I think one is creating that open forum and environment that says, yes, you're welcome, please come in and give us your thoughts. I think that's something that we might have to change according to some groups that I ran into in the town. I think the other thing is also in bringing forward from the board what it is that we're talking about. So I've seen some things, specifically some of the things that we're going to be voting on, where there's the concept. And sometimes I think it's hard for people to get up and talk about just what is that concept. And what I would hope to be able to do with the select board is to actually present to the community the end-to-end proposal. For example, if we're going to buy a piece of land, how is that piece of land going to be managed? So it's an end-to-end, because then I think people can understand, what we used to call in business cradle-to-grave concept. And when people understand that, then they can come in and poke at where they think they have areas and concerns about.
And Susan?
Thank you for the question. As a professional communicator, I sort of live and breathe this every day. And I feel very strongly that as a communications professional that we need to meet people where they are. So the spray and pay sort of approach to communications, blasting things out, is not very effective in my view. I think it's a matter of meeting people, engaging with people face to face if possible. I think it's great what the district does now. You have the opportunity to come off mute the school board meetings. You can you can participate by Zoom or kind of participate in the broadcast and see what's happening. But people do have the ability to come off mute. They do have the ability to make comments at the start of the school board meeting and and voice their concerns. Tim, I really do agree with you, and I think it's a great point that you make, and you too, Mary Beth, where you say that there are people in the community who feel like they're not being heard or understood. And I take very seriously, or would take very seriously if I'm elected, the ability to see, you and I don't agree on transgender, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person or I'm a bad person. We got to figure out how to meet the middle ground, like you said. And so I think that's really important to have that decorum, but I think it's also important to meet people where they are. The, things like going out in the community to the like Huntington Commons and visiting with people who might not be able to come in person to school board meetings and being able to sit and listen with them. The PTA, we have Brooke here, who leads the consolidated PTA, who does an excellent job in kind of mobilizing the community to come and be involved and informing them of when things are happening. But we're falling short in some ways, because at the school budget meeting, there were 41 people, some low number of people who approved the school budget. That's far too low. So there's something that's not right there that needs to be fixed, and I look forward to being part of that solution. Thank you.
Okay. The next question, we're going to start with Tim. What action steps will you take to balance the desire for lower taxes with the demand for more services and needs of the residents during your term?
I guess you have to, like Susan's saying, you have to sit down with people and discuss what is important to the town, and what things are needed and what aren't needed, and really discussing things and finding out, because most people can say they know how I feel about transgender, but I've hardly scratched at it. You know what I mean? Most people don't know how I feel. I feel as though that the regular kids have to have a voice, which I feel like they don't. I hope to be there for them. But as far as to money-wise, boy, you have to get into the roots of the thing, of money, and the town has to decide as the majority where the money's going to go. And then you all have to, we all have to stand beside it and work together. Thanks.
Mary Beth?
So, again, I go back to my opening remarks and why I'm running for the select board, and it has to do with the headwinds that we discussed with the chief in terms of the fire and what's going to be happening in the long term, as we have a aging volunteer workforce there, and there's not a lot of young fillers coming in. So when you're talking about how are you going to balance lowering taxes, the desire for lower taxes, and then do more services, there's actually this big, when I'm talking about this big headwind, where we have to come up with a different strategy about what we're going to do for a core service in our town, which is fire. Unfortunately, my husband and I, and most unfortunately my sister-in-law, just experienced the great service of the town of Kennebunkport, Arundel, in terms of the fire, where her house caught on fire down at Goose Rocks Beach a few weeks ago. And so this, to me, is now extremely near and dear to my heart. So it's not only just I want to say some, catchy sayings about, well, if we do this, we can lower taxes and we can have more services. No, I think that we have to get down to brass tactics here in terms of what is actually going to be our strategy for our fire department. How are we going to go from a volunteer force to a per diem? What type of strategy are we going to use to pay for those services? And where are we going to be able to give up? Because right now, 84% of our revenue comes from a tax base. And we worked really hard with within the budget board, with Alan and others on the budget board, with the select board, and with Lori, the town manager, to really try to reduce the mill rate increase this year. So I do think that we have something really hard to work through here, and I would like to bring my work experience as a service to the town to help answer how we're going to do this.
And George?
Yes, first of all, I have to say the town has done an excellent job on keeping the mill rate one of the lowest in the state and the lowest I've experienced anywhere else. One of my chief concerns here is, and I've seen it elsewhere, is this is primarily a town of retirees. And we've been very fortunate because our values of real estate have gone up very high. So if you own property here, you've done very well. I lived for a period in New Jersey where I saw the same thing happened. And unfortunately, as they raised the tax rates, retired people, particularly those on a fixed income, suffered immensely. They were forced to sell and leave, not because they couldn't afford their house, they owned it free and clear, but they couldn't afford the taxes, which were astronomically higher than here. So I think they're doing a great job. I'll congratulate Mary Beth and the Budget Committee at keeping it there. There's room for a bit to go up, but I would be looking more from my previous work at getting outside funding for various projects. I've done that in the commercial world. I would hope to be able to do that in the government world as well. So once again, I think the town is doing a good job compared to other people or other communities in the state of Maine and elsewhere. And I think if they just keep a steady hand, that they can keep the tax bill rate in good order.
Thank you. Okay, this is a question just for George and Mary Beth. Oh,
I didn't answer that question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
happy not to, but
sorry. I skipped you.
That's okay.
Oh, my gosh. I'm fired. Okay, Susan, would you like to answer that question? Thank you for saying something.
thanks. It's a great question, and I do think that what I mentioned earlier about the low number of people who were able to be there for the budget meeting. There's something that's not working quite right, and I think we need to fix that to make sure that people are there and kind of present and accounted for raising their own voice. It would be my job as being part of the school board to walk that fine line and be able to squeeze as much as we could out of the funds that we have. To continue to have the great reputation that RSU 21 has. But I think what we need to do, as Tim said, is hear more from the community and really have more community members, residents involved in the process and understanding, because the understanding the school budget, because the school budget makes up, across the three communities, makes up somewhere between 60 to the low 60s to high 60% of the overall budget. So it's really important to understand what the school budget is and what it's being used for. But in order to walk that fine line, we need to get more input and more involvement from the community. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I was thinking about my mill rate in Saco, which is a big difference from your mill rate here. Okay, so this is a question for George and Mary Beth. The town is taking steps to mitigate some of the impact by remaking the pier, raising the causeway on Pier Road, participating in local climate initiatives, and planning on how we can prevent flooding in various areas. As a candidate, do you acknowledge that climate change is real, and do you support what is being done now and what may have to be done in the future to protect our residents and businesses from rising tides? George, you want to go first?
Okay. It's interesting, as you read the newspapers today, there's a flood, it's because of climate change. There's a drought because of climate change. Clearly, the world is warming. Clearly, the lower parts of Kennebunkport are seeing more flooding, I believe, than in the past. And there's a real potential that will continue. So I think there needs to be work done on those areas along the river, and in particular, and in the center part of town where we've all seen the flooding. And I would look once again for government relief in that area. There's funds out there, and things need to be done perhaps to raise things, or in other cases, as I've seen in the past, when you have repeated flooding in areas, rebuilding as is, I don't think is the solution. I think you have to rebuild in light of the event happening again, which is basically elevating things to a higher level and rebuilding them as they were before.
Thank you. Mary Beth?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. So, so we're in a unique situation also in our town where we have 31 miles of shoreline. So when we went through the budget discussion this year, Chris brought forward from the town, the work that's going to happen out by Walker's Point, due to the storm surge that we went through this winter. Some of you that lived through it with us here. And really, when you talked about the culverts and the issues there and the flooding that happened across the road there, when Chris was taking us through it, that culvert is rotted. So the metal was collapsing and it was rotted. So when you think back about it, regardless of your view of climate change, I agree with George, and others that, we are seeing storm surges higher. We are seeing rising tides, and because of our 31 miles of shoreline, we do have to invest and protect that. We have to invest in and protect it for our community, for our residents, for their home properties. We have to invest in and protect it for the revenue that we get from the tourist season here, because a lot of people come to ride that road and view the ocean. And so that's part of this overarching thing of where do we going to put our dollars for money. I agree with George. It's always good to look out to the government as the government came in for the pier work. I think it's good to look out for the government, to the state, for other areas where we can get funding for this. And this has to be part of our ongoing maintenance of the 31 miles of shoreline. What do we do to literally shore it up as we continue to see these more powerful storms come through?
Thank you. Okay, this is a question for our school board candidates. I have seen and heard about many citizens across the country that have challenged their local schools on a variety of things, books, prayer, etc. As a candidate, what are your views on banning books in RSU 21? And if a challenge was brought forward by a parent, resident, or neighbor to ban a book, what would be your response and your process? How about we start with Susan?
Yeah, great question, and I'm so glad that it's being asked because I think it's really important. And as Tim says, these are the sorts of things that we need to be talking about. I think it was Robert Frost who said, "We go to school to learn what books to read for the rest of our lives." Now, Robert Frost was not from Maine. He wasn't from New England. He wasn't born and bred here. But he certainly made a contribution here. And I think many people associate Robert Frost, I know I do, with New England. I'm not in favor of banning books. As I said earlier, I think it's important that kids in school learn about our world and how big and beautiful and complex it is, and that we have a duty to teach our children, our students, how to think, not what to think. Parents have a choice and have the opportunity to provide input on what their students learn and read, certainly within the home and also outside of the home. And I would encourage parents who have concerns about what their students are reading to voice those concerns to the school. But I don't think that parents should have veto power in terms of what is available to students through the school library or even the public libraries. I do think, and I want to make this point very clear, that all books are not appropriate for all students, and that there are some subject matter material that is appropriate for older students. So I'm not suggesting that we provide explicit material to young students. I want to make that very clear, because that's one of the arguments that's made about banning books is, well, if you make it available to the masses, then that means that my kindergartner or my second grader is going to be reading explicit material. That explicit material may be intensely helpful to a student who's transitioning or going through some difficult moment in their life. And I think it's important that we continue to make that material available to them. We're not requiring them to read it, but make it available. It's their decision to read it. Thank you.
Tim?
This is a tough one. Remember I said I thought I was stupid? I actually didn't read a book until I was on my honeymoon. I memorized everything. And so it's interesting when people would talk about books and just say, oh, the book's way better than the movie. It took me a long time to figure out that yeah, the book is way better than the movie. I did learn that. It took me a while. I was a little slow on takeoff. But it's easy for me on the books. It's just like Susan said, it's age appropriate. You know, if there's books that, you know, only 18-year-olds can have, and it's just about talking about porn and so many sexual things, that no, it shouldn't be in the schools. That should be the parents' decision to allow their kids to see that. So it's simple for me. It's age appropriate. You know, if it's hard to talk about in a situation like this, you would think maybe you know, 8th graders shouldn't have it. And I think there's a lot of work that still can be done with, because it's not banning books. It's putting the right books in front of people, or the age appropriate to me. Because I wouldn't ban books. It took me a long time to figure it out. I don't want to get rid of them anymore. I think they're great. Thank you.
Okay, this is a question for all of you. If you received $1 million grant for the town of Kennebunkport or for the school district, what would you do with it and why? Mary Beth?
Oh, great, thanks. Can I get 2 more minutes? $1 million? What would I do with it? Well, let's think. I'm still stuck on the fire department. You know, so let's talk about what the town has done really well. A lot of things. And one of them specifically is putting capital together, as Lori has explained to us in the budget committee, and how that funds capital projects going forward. So if you say you got $1 million, what would you do with the Kennebunkport? Well, we'll tell you that the town management and the select board have already got this nice capital project going where they're setting aside money so that when a fire truck that you're going to vote on in a couple weeks comes up, there's already money being pulled out of the capital reserves. So they are doing a really nice job on that. So it's not like we have this list of things that you have to go out and start spending the $1 million on. But I do think in terms of the $1 million, if you look at what the town's been making trade-offs on right now, you know, if you drive down the roads that are owned by the town, not so much the state, there's trade-offs that they have been making to keep the mill rate down, to keep the tax increase down. So I think a little bit of a facelift would be good for the town in terms of going back and redoing some of those roads. We talked about shoring up some of the shoreline because of the storms. I think that would be money well spent for the town to go in on. I'm not sure how much. I don't see the little clicker behind me about how much of the $1 million I've already took out right now. I do think that you know, we're looking at other initiatives, things that have to be on revenue generation. So I think it would be nice to put some funding into revenue generating things for the town. I do not know what they are right now, but that would be part of a work stream to go off and figure that out.
Okay. Susan?
Yeah, thank you. Wow, $1 million.
I'm never going to miss you again now.
Oh, no. Thank you, Mary Lou. Sadly, $1 million is really a drop in the bucket when you look at our overall budget, but certainly would welcome a $1 million grant. I think a couple of things. I think we'd have to look across the community, not just at the schools, obviously, but look across the community on what the highest priorities are, where is the greatest, most pressing need. I think I volunteered recently, just got on the list to volunteer. I haven't started volunteering yet, let me be clear, but with the Climate Action Group, is there somebody here who's part of that group? Yes, thank you. So, and my understanding is that the sea level in Dock Square over the next 25 years or so is estimated to rise by about a foot, which seems pretty significant when you have a high tide and you look over and see just how high the water is getting. So I think climate is an important issue that impacts the schools as well. And so, but thinking about the schools in particular, I think I would take a hard look at teachers and the pay that teachers get, and looking at the pay equity for teachers who are ed techs and who are librarians, and making sure that they are getting that we're offering a salary that's competitive so that our teachers stick around, and that they also can potentially afford to live in the community. I know where I grew up, seeing my teachers out in the grocery store or at a restaurant, you really felt like even more part of a community. But sadly, I think many of our teachers cannot afford to live here in our community. So I would think about trying to work with the unions to try to potentially boost the teachers' salaries.
And Tim,
Yeah,
if
$1 million
you
bucks.
had $1 million, you know that song?
Yeah, it's not what it used to be. I guess after everything I've talked about tonight, it would be trying to get the woodworking class or, certain things back in the high school, and or whether it's, my son had a hard time in the 90s just traveling from Kennebunk to Biddeford to the construction trades. So I guess short term, a little bit of money could help in the travel to make sure it's easy for the kids, because it's not easy actually for the kids. I was really lucky. I had a 100-foot walk to go from Biddeford High School to the Biddeford Vocational School, and it was easy. My son had a 15-minute drive one way, 15-minute drive the other way, and with the, what's it called, the blocks, it was really hard for him to go to the Biddeford Voc. So I guess I would want to work on transportation to whether it's Sanford or Biddeford or the Portland Arts. That's another vocational school that Kennebunk uses actually, is the Portland Arts. And so I guess I would make it so it's really easier for transportation and start the groundwork to do what I talked about is, as a huge goal, I would love to see a vocational school in Kennebunk. It doesn't have to be as large as Sanford. I think the needs is there. So I guess I would put a lot of money into exploration of how that could happen and how much it would cost.
Okay. George?
Yes, the most pressing problem I have seen in Kennebunkport the last few years has been the storm damage. And I'm pretty much assured that that's going to continue. So I would put half of it in projects to alleviate future storm damage, because I think it would pay dividends in spades for the future. It would save more than you would spend. The second area that I would put the other half in is in the employees of the town. In different organizations over the years, I've learned that your employees are your most valuable asset. And some of that might go, as been suggested up here, to paying fire department people due to the need for that. But overall, I would put the other half into the employees of the town, whether it included a few extra ones or just increasing benefits to make sure they stay, because everywhere I go now, and I'm sure you're all like this, there seems to be a shortage, whether it's teachers. I go to McDonald's and I can't get in because they only have the takeout window open. I go to restaurants in town and sometimes they're closed Tuesdays and Wednesdays because they can't get help. And that holds true for the town, and I think the other half I would put into the town to make sure that we have the best people possible and that they stay.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. This is another one for just the selectmen. The village parcel. What would you like to see happen with the village parcel? George, you want to start?
Boy, that's a tough one, not having been involved with that in the past. As a friend of mine over here can attest, there is almost no land available for purchase in this town. So I would be inclined to at least sell part of it, as prices are very high now, and use that for the town reserves, if you will. That would be my one suggestion at the present time.
Mary Beth?
Yeah, I think, from what I understand the history of it, it was a good, some would say it was a good deal on the purchase at the time. And I agree with George, the market value of property in the town is skyrocketed. So, in essence of due diligence and fairness within the town and to the taxpayers, you would want to extract as much value as out of that property as possible. But if the town has a need or a desire for movement of the town office, because that's part of the discussion to that parcel, then there should be, that, should be talked about and looked about. And how can you do it such that it's not a burden on the taxpayer, but how is it where you actually could become out profitable from a taxpayer's point of view? So for example, just thinking top off the head, does a developer build it and you give them a tax break and they build the town hall for you, they own the land, they build some other things that are maybe revenue generating for the town, either type of housing or other type of small businesses. I think it's a very, it's hard to answer in 2 minutes. It requires a lot of thought and a lot of listening to. And I do know for a fact that there's very, very strong opinions in the town about what to do with that parcel. So I think, this is one of the areas where it really behooves the town to think through, listen to everybody's point of view, and then the draw. But my take would be, let's extract as most value as we can out of the property.
Thank you. And for our last question, we want to know, and we're going to start with Tim. What is your vision for the future of Kennebunkport?
Hometown. It's changed a lot over 57 years. I remember when the port used to open up at Memorial Day and close at Labor Day. That's a tough one. I guess, it would be making sure that it's very inviting, which I think it is, just the landscape alone is. I don't know, the vision for Kennebunkport would be running things really efficiently, whether it's the town, the fire department, the police department, the roads, the school system. It would be taking the time to, like this mostly happens too. I'm not going to take anything away from this school or anybody in this room that helps and volunteers and everything. I think we do a great job. It's funny to say this. It's to try and keep our town still a town. It's try to keep it. I want to say what it was because I know Kennebunkport is a little differently than it is now. I actually have a second home someplace else because I thought it got busy here. I don't have electricity on my second home, so it's a little, it's out in the woods. But I don't know. I guess we'd keep doing what we're doing because I think we've done a great job. People want to be here. People love Kennebunkport. I love Kennebunkport. And hoping that people like that keep coming. That's what we want. That's what America's about, is being inviting. That's my thought.
Mary Beth?
I think first and foremost, to Tim's point, is, not changing the character. So why are we, if you look up the definition of community, there's something that people have in common. And, this community, I think, is truly, if we all wrote down the one common denominator we have in this room and the people on the calls and stuff, I think it's the love of the feel of Kennebunkport. I had friends visit from upstate New York, and, you walk down the road, people are waving, you're waving, you're waving, you're waving. And my friend says to me, "You know all these people?" And I'm like, "No, this is just what you do here." And so it's, so the future of Kennebunkport, the vision I would see for it is for that warmth, that engagement, that community feeling to still stay. I do think that there is fractions happening now because of some of the hot topics that we've talked about this evening, and that's why I think it's extremely important to get back to the table and listening. I think in terms of the future, I don't want to ever see any group get blocked out of being able to live here. So for example, we talked about keeping the tax rate low. One of the reasons you want to do that is because, yes, the housing prices have gone up, but you only extract that value when you sell. So if you still want to live here, we've got to keep the taxes low so that people that work here, the median average income here is $87,000. That's not a lot. And if that's the medium, that means 50% are lower. So we have to keep due diligence, fiducial responsibility, to keep the mill rate down, to do the good works, to keep that community feeling. And I think really to make sure that we keep that whole social economic scale, have the opportunity for everyone to live in the community.
George?
I think I probably have the same feelings as everyone else here. I think one of the key things I would like to see is that the town is protected in the future from the storm damage that we've been seeing in the past. I'd also like to make sure that it's affordable, and I'd like to see the character of the town stay the same. I don't want it to change too much. I see growth, but I think it has to be controlled growth. And I want to make it a place where people want to come for tourism, because when everything's said and done, and we all have to go through town in August and July, and the traffic is unbearable, we just have to sit and bear it, because that's what this town survives on, is the tourism for 2 or 3 months, and then we can enjoy the empty streets for the remaining 8 months of the year. So I'd like to see the growth continue, but be slow, and that tourism is fostered and maybe mitigated a little bit with the traffic and other things. And once again, I've seen a lot of storm damage the last few years, and I think things can be done to mitigate that, and that anything spent in that area will be paid for in spades in the future. Thank you.
And Susan?
Yeah, thank you. I'm afraid I don't have anything really original to say beyond what's already been shared by my fellow panelists here. But preserving that community feel, I think, is the first thing that I jotted down. My kids and I were involved. We live on Wiles District Road, and for those who've been involved in the sidewalk process, it's been a great and inclusive process, very open. And I will say that as part of that process, I went from being the mom who was really advocating for sidewalks, because I want my kids, for me, to be able to ride a bike, walk the dog, and not fear our lives at every turn. But in coming to the public hearings and listening to people who've lived on Wiles District for a hell of a lot longer than we have, and say they're concerned about the community feel and losing that community feel if we put in sidewalks, I thought, you know what, they're right. Because one of the things I love about where we live is that, you know, the approach to our house, the undulating hills and arriving home, it's a nice way to sort of coast in and close the day. But if we had put in full sidewalks all along the road, we would have lost that community feel. And so I listened, and I think that makes a lot of sense. So when you asked the question, that's the first thing that came to mind, was really trying to preserve the community feel of Kennebunkport. And continue to be a magnet for people for families, for people of all socioeconomic classes, for people of all ethnicities, all genders, to feel at home here. Because whether or not we were born here or we live here now, as someone who I'm getting to know and I have a lot of respect for, this is our home, whether we were born here or not. And so and I would treat it with that sort of care. This is our home, and I want to preserve it for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, since you've all been so good with the time, we have just a little bit more time. We're going to give you each 3 minutes, and we would like to know, why should we vote for you? George, would you like to start?
Well, coming from the military, I'm a little modest when it comes to tooting my own horn. But I think I have the experience financially, business-wise, working with people, and organizing things, particularly new organizations, that I could do a very good job as a selectman. I'd bring in a fresh flavor to the group that's there. And I have to add that from my perspective, this town is very well run. I know there's some glitches. Different people have things that maybe they would like to see done differently. But my interest would be continuing exactly the way they've been doing it, to a degree, to work on improving the infrastructure, particularly the downtown area, which I've watched flooded on repeated bases, and I think things can be done there. my focus to a large degree would be making sure that retired folks aren't forced out of their houses because they can't afford to, pay the taxes as they get older, because I've seen that happen. And now that I'm on a fixed income myself, I can personally attest to those thoughts. So those would be the primary reasons, and I think I'd be an open person that you could come talk to. For the first time in my life, I have a lot of free time, and am interested in getting out there and involved in the community. So in a nutshell, I guess that would sum things up. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things, but you kind of caught me on the spot here.
Thank you. Susan?
Thank you. I'm so glad we had more time left. It's a great question. So there are 12 duties that are a part of being a school board member, and a big part of that is establishing policy. Many know that it's up to the administration to do the procedures, but it's a big part of the school board is coming up with policy. And I feel like I've spent a large part of my professional life working on policy. I worked in the New Hampshire Senate as a speechwriter and legislative aide for a while. I did policy work, environmental and social policy work at the World Bank Group, and I feel like I have that experience that I could bring to the board. I have a lot to learn. And I've learned a lot just in the kind of lowercase c campaigning process. I've learned a lot. I've met a lot of really great people, a lot of interesting people, people with differing points of view that I'll learn from. And so I come with an open mind, an open heart, and a willingness to give it my all. Come prepared to discussions, come prepared to listen, and come prepared to learn and hopefully make good decisions on behalf of RSU 21. Please vote for me. Thank you.
Tim?
I guess, like some of the things I said tonight, saying the hard things, but trying to say them so that people don't judge you. And that's what I was trying to do tonight, because I want to make sure I'm not against anything. What I want to do is say it with kindness, have it so people listen to me, because I can scream as loud as I want. If people aren't listening, it doesn't matter. And I'm really not, I've always been this way. I was like the black sheep in the family. I was always the one to say something. And I'm learning, and actually my daughter taught me this, is I really built my businesses with an iron fist. And it's amazing, my 31-year-old daughter has opened my eyes and made me want to run for school board. She made me want to, she asked me to get on some committees, the facilities committee. I'm a community member, voted on that right now. And, I just hope that I can keep changing, because I have to. I want to change to make a difference. And I want people to make sure that I mean it. Even if I believe in something different than other people at this table, that's what America's about. That's how we built this place. And and I just have my opinions, things I pointed out that mean a lot to me, because family means a lot to me. I don't see all my brothers and sisters all the time, but my immediate family, I spend a ton of time with. That's all I want to do. I just want to spend it with my wife, my kids, my grandson. And I'm lucky enough to have a farm in town. I raise cows. I have 13 pigs. I just had 8 piglets. I have 100 chickens. I have 3 dozen turkeys. I have 3 different kinds of goats, and I don't know, I'm really lucky. I hope to get on the board and help everyone, and that's my goal, and I hope I get there. And one thing I've said to my daughter, even if I don't get voted on this board, I am going to work so hard at trying to do some of the things I talked about tonight and make a difference, and that's what I hope to do. And I hope to bring along as many people that want to. Even if they don't want to listen, I hope I can talk in a way to make them hear me. And that's what I hope. And thank you.
Mary Beth?
So my mother always told me that in life you really don't have to make a lot of plans, that things will happen and doors will open. So when she would see me sitting there trying to plan everything out for the rest of my life, she would kindly remind me that that's not how it works. And I believe I am running for the select board because I believe it's the right time for me. When I looked at the problem set in front of the town, I believe that I can step in and help. I don't have an agenda. I did not have this on my bucket list. But I have served on 3 boards here in town. I was actually asked to run for the select board seat. It's because of the work I did on the boards. So I do my homework. I try to show up and bring value add. I try to listen, and I make sure and try to make sure that I'm listened to. I really do think, I agree with George, that this town is run really well. But as we talked with Lori at the budget meeting, there are those headwinds, and she has been thinking about them. She just needs the fertile ground to start having those discussions, because there will be some changes needed. A town cannot escape what's happening in the macro environment of the world. So the issues we talked about with the chief and fire is no different than any other town. We have some uniqueness is that we have a pure volunteer group, but these issues are not unique. The resources that George talked about, they're not unique to our town, but these things, we have to find some probably unique solutions for us to make sure that we maintain the look and feel of the port that we want to. So I'm stepping up. I threw my hat in the ring. I would like your vote. I think I can do a really good job for you. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for your answers. Thank you all for running for your seats. We wish you very good luck. Thank you all for being here tonight, in person and online. There are 2 ways to vote. I hope you all know that there are 2 ways to vote. Absentee by June 8th at 4 p.m. You can still do that. Or right here in person on Tuesday, June 13, from 8 to 8. Is that right? I think. Mm-hmm. So, thank you all. Thank you all.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Mary Lou.
Have a great night.